You lose your wallet. $20. That's it. $20 gone. And yet something in your chest tightens. Your stomach drops. For a moment, it feels less like an inconvenience and more like an injury, not a paper cut. Something deeper. Something your body seems to register as a wound. That reaction doesn't make sense. $20 won't change your life. You'll barely notice it's missing by next week. So why does losing it feel so much worse than finding $20 feels good? Here's the strange part. Your brain isn't malfunctioning when it does this. It's running code that's millions of years old. Code that was never designed for wallets or currency or bank accounts at all. And once you see what that code actually is, you'll understand why money messes with your head in ways that have nothing to do with math. Economists have a name for what you just felt. They call it loss aversion. The idea that losing something hurts roughly twice as much as gaining the same thing feels good. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky first demonstrated this in the late 1970s, in a series of experiments that would eventually win Kahneman a Nobel Prize. They gave people simple choices involving money and watched how differently people behaved depending on whether a choice was framed as a gain or a loss. The results were consistent and strange. People would take real risks to avoid losing money, risks they would never take to gain the same amount. A guaranteed loss of $50 felt unbearable. A coin flip that might lose you $100 or lose you nothing at all somehow felt more tolerable, even though the math said otherwise. Your brain doesn't treat gains and losses as opposites on a balanced scale. It treats them as fundamentally different experiences. Why would evolution build something so lopsided? Because for nearly all of human history, losses were far more dangerous than gains were rewarding. Imagine your ancestors on the savannah tens of thousands of years ago. Finding an extra piece of fruit was nice. It meant a little more energy for the day. But losing your food supply, your shelter, your place in the group? That could mean starvation. That could mean death. In a world with no supermarkets, no savings accounts, no safety net of any kind, a loss wasn't just a setback. It was a direct threat to survival. So your brain evolved to weight losses far more heavily than gains. Not because it's irrational, but because for most of human history, that imbalance kept people alive. The ancestors who panicked a little too much about losing resources outlived the ones who shrugged it off. And you inherited their nervous systems. This is the part most people never think about. When you flinch at a stock market dip, when you feel sick after a bad purchase, when you'd rather keep a mediocre job than risk a better one, you're not being weak or foolish or bad with money. You're running an ancient alarm system that was built for famine and predators, now firing off inside a world of index funds and credit card statements. Neuroscientists have actually watched this alarm system in action. Studies using brain imaging have found that anticipating a financial loss activates regions associated with fear and disgust, some of the very same regions that light up when people are shown threatening images or spoiled food. Your brain, on some level, doesn't fully distinguish between losing money and encountering something genuinely dangerous. The wiring for both runs through similar territory. That's why losing $20 can feel like an injury. Because as far as your ancient nervous system is concerned, it kind of is. So where does blood come into this? There's a reason the comparison isn't just poetic. Anthropologists and economist researchers studying decision-making across cultures have found that the physiological stress response to financial loss, the racing heart, the tightened stomach, the flush of cortisol, closely mirrors the body's response to physical danger. Your body doesn't have a separate alarm system for money. It borrowed the one built for bleeding, starving, and running from predators, and repurposed it for spreadsheets and bank notifications. Think about what this means for how you actually behave with money. It explains why people hold on to losing stocks far longer than they should, waiting for a rebound that may never come, simply because selling would mean making the loss official. Behavioral economists call this the disposition effect, and it shows up again and again in real trading data. People sell their winners too early, savoring the gain, and hold their losers too long, avoiding the pain of admitting defeat. It explains why a single bad month can feel more emotionally intense than several good months combined. It explains why people avoid checking their bank balance during a hard financial stretch, even though checking it might help them make better decisions. Looking away doesn't fix the loss, but some ancient part of the brain treats not looking as a form of safety. And it explains something even stranger. Research on the endowment effect, another concept Kahneman helped establish, has found that people value something more highly simply because they own it. Give someone a coffee mug for free, then ask what price they'd sell it for, and they'll typically demand more money than they would have paid to buy that exact same mug in the first place. Ownership itself seems to trigger a kind of psychological loss aversion. The moment something becomes yours, losing it starts to feel like losing a part of yourself. Isn't that strange? A mug is just a mug, but your brain doesn't experience it that way once your hands are around it. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature, inherited from a world where hoarding what you already had was often smarter than gambling for more. But the modern world is nothing like the one this system was built for. Today, losses aren't usually about starvation. They're line items. A subscription you forgot to cancel, a stock that dipped, a bad restaurant bill. Your ancient alarm system doesn't know the difference between an existential threat and an annoying Tuesday. It fires the same way regardless. This is where it gets genuinely useful to understand. Financial advisors and behavioral economists have found that people who understand loss aversion tend to make calmer decisions, not because the feeling disappears, but because they recognize it for what it is. A survival instinct, not a signal that something catastrophic is actually happening. Just knowing that your body treats a market dip like a predator sighting can be enough to make you pause instead of panic selling. There's a broader pattern here, too. Societies throughout history have built entire systems around managing this instinct. Insurance itself is essentially an institutionalized answer to loss aversion, a way of paying a small, certain cost to avoid the psychological terror of a large, uncertain one. People will pay more for insurance than the statistical risk actually justifies, simply because the peace of mind of avoiding a potential loss is worth more to the brain than the math says it should be. Casinos understand this instinct too, just in reverse, dangling the emotional high of a possible win to override the quieter, steadier discomfort of a guaranteed loss. Even negotiation tactics lean on this wiring. Skilled negotiators often frame offers in terms of what the other side stands to lose rather than what they stand to gain, because loss-framed language tends to move people more powerfully than identical gain-framed language. The words change nothing about the actual numbers, but the brain responds as if they change everything. So the next time you feel that tightening in your chest over a bad purchase, a dropping number on a screen, or money that simply vanished somewhere you can't quite trace, pause for a second. That feeling isn't proof that something terrible has happened. It's a survival tool built for a world of scarcity and starvation, now firing inside a world of digital balances and unread bank notifications. You can't switch it off. Nobody can. But you can notice it. You can recognize the moment your ancient brain sounds an alarm and ask whether the threat is real or just an old signal misfiring in a new world. Because that $20 in your empty wallet was never really blood. It just felt that way because somewhere inside you, a very old part of your brain still can't tell the difference.